I am so glad to have my friend in this interesting way that happens after, through COVID, but just someone I've admired for so long, Roger Hutchison, and his artistic endeavors in every aspect of his life. And one of the things that draws me to all that you do is that you put the truth out there in all of its beauty and all of its strangeness. And I appreciate that because we have very little time or stamina for BS anymore. And that's probably a gift of COVID, frankly. And I appreciate that in you, and you put your heart and soul into everything. So Roger Hutchison, who's in Houston, serving at Palmer Memorial Episcopal Church, but Tennessee boy, and came through Western North Carolina at Warren Wilson. Mm-hmm. And so grateful to have you back, and hope you're getting a chance to enjoy the mountains as well as being here. But we're so glad to have you, and very grateful for Kelsey Davis from here in our diocese, from here in the cathedral, helping to facilitate this wonderful conversation. So thank you for all who are here. Thank you for you who are out there, and we appreciate you joining us this way as well, and we hope that it's a blessing for everyone here. So thank you all. Appreciate it.
Well, hi, Roger.
Kelsey.
I thought we might begin by just taking a moment together. And I'd like to read a quote from The Art of Calm, and just invite us into a moment of silence and feeling our feet on the floor, a moment of prayer together. So let us pray. I have a friend who sat with me during a panic attack that hit while I was in my office at work. I will never forget her words. Roger, just as I am sitting with you in this scary moment, you will one day sit with someone else who needs you. And she was right. Please pull up a chair and let's sit together. You are not alone. I invite you to take one deeper than normal breath in and out, and find your feet on the floor. And together we can say amen. Amen. So Roger, you have offered us a beautiful and pragmatic companion. When I was reading through this book, companionship was central. And so I'm curious, we'll get there. But I'm wondering if we can start with you telling us about the crash and what happened.
Thank you. And thank you for a beautiful opening. And thank you for being here. For those of you who are in person, and those of you who will hopefully have the opportunity to hear this, I am thrilled to be here. And I am soaking in the mountain air. As you know, I'm in Houston, Texas, and our air weighs a lot, and it's very wet, and it's very hot. So this is beautiful. I begin the book by reflecting on what I was seeing from the back of an ambulance. I was in the back of an ambulance, and I thought I was dying. My heart was racing. I had been to dinner with my family, and I looked at my beloved, and I couldn't see her face. My vision had just blurred. And she had taken me to Cracker Barrel, which I love, but I hadn't eaten in 3 weeks. And she was trying to get me to eat and trying to get me to sleep, and I wasn't doing any of that. And I remember she said, do you want to go to the emergency room? And what I wanted is to be told that I didn't want this, but I needed to know, did I have cancer? Was I having a heart attack? Something was wrong. And it was manifesting itself in physical ways that matched any one of those scary illnesses that you can Google, or you should never Google. Don't do that. But I did it, and I went down that deep hole, and I was dying. And so I ended up, and that happened to me twice. I really shared just one of those in the book, but laying on the bed, and they couldn't do anything for me. I often say, if I won all the money in the world, or had all the money in the world, I would put a mental health specialist in the ER, because the majority of people who go to the ER really need to just be told they're okay and be listened to. There are, of course, the tragic accidents and things that get people to the ER, but the number of people that go in for a mental health crisis is stunning. And I was told that the only way I would get help is if I told them I was suicidal. And I wasn't suicidal. I just wanted to feel better. And so I remember thinking, as the doctor walked away, that he moved on to someone whose wounds were visible. But that was the crash. I think what I didn't say is so much, I'm a giver. I'm a people helper. I'm very sensitive. And, Hurricane Harvey had hit. And so a lot of that was tied into taking on everybody else's work and not taking care of my own.
And I was really struck by your articulation of the hospital experience, and you even named the broken system of the medical system. Will you share that? Yeah.
Well, I feel bad. I have a lot of friends who are medical professionals, and I work at a church in the largest medical center in the world, actually. So this is not to be ugly towards the amazing work that happens. For me, the greatest care I received when I went into the hospital that evening were from the men who carried me from my house to the ambulance. The EMS workers, this, the burly guy. I was crying. I'm a big guy. And he held my hand. And he said, you're okay. You're going to be okay. That was huge. That's really what I was looking for. I didn't know that. Once I got to the hospital, they blew out a vein. I wasn't there 5 minutes when I call her in the book, the Happy Bill lady rolls her card in. Literally rolled her card in while I was in the middle of a mental health crisis and asked us how much we'd like to, or what credit card we wanted to put on file.
Yeah.
And I remember thinking, if I wasn't feeling the way that I was feeling, I would not have been a very nice person. And I'm a really nice person, but I was not happy that night.
Yeah.
And I just felt like I had wounds that there was nobody to triage that. There was nobody to take care of me. And I laid there all night long. I had said, I'd like to talk to a mental health person after they said to me, you're healthy. After I got an $8,000 bill for, all the different tests that I had that showed I was very healthy, which is great. But it was not a healing experience for me. You might ask in a minute about that. And there was a moment of healing in my experience, but the majority of that was really very miserable. And the only way I would have gotten, like I said, is the suicide component, and that wasn't part of the picture. the other thing that happened is he said, well, we'll get somebody to talk to you, but you're just going to have to get in line, and we'll bring the iPad in, and you'll be able to talk to them on the screen. And I was like, I didn't need it. And so there's a beautiful part of the story coming up, but my experience was not good. I wanted help. And then all they handed me was a stack of paper at the end of the morning that said, this is what therapy is. You need therapy. And and you need to do this, and it was a stack of paper. And I remember going, and I was sobbing. I couldn't sleep, much less try to figure out how to get a therapist. And so my wife, we'll talk about maybe this in a minute, but my wife got to work trying to do this. This was in September. The first appointment she could get was in February. And now, I've never been suicidal, but at that point, I was like, wow, if this is what it is, then there's something really wrong. Because I have resources. I have the ability we know how to look for help. We know how to navigate a system that's already a mess. And I began, of course, to think about others who don't have what we have. And so, but yeah. That the system, and I continually find that to be the case with a lot of folks who go in, especially for that immediate, there's somebody at the door. Didn't want them just standing out there. I see a little face peering right over the window. I was like, come on in. Maybe.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I give thanks for medical professionals, and I give thanks for the good work that is done. I feel sorry for them because that is not what their training is in. And so what we have not done is prepared people to be first level responders for people who are experiencing that.
Absolutely, and totally honor and hear your deep respect for the medical teams. And the reality of broken systems is exactly that. So anyone in that system who is trying to provide care, who's in that ecosystem, or a patient that comes in, if the system itself isn't functional, every single person is going to suffer and be limited and restrained or constrained in some way.
They did not want to help me.
Exactly.
They wanted to help me.
They also have a laundry, they have a list of folks to triaging.
Exactly.
Yeah, and so it's just true.
Yeah.
Their hands are tied as well. But something did happen in that hospital room, and I think it's profound what happens, and I'm excited for you to share what happened, because you talk about the wounds that are visible, and then you talk about the wounds that aren't. And so what happened to someone who tended to what you were experiencing that maybe wasn't as obvious to the medical staff that was there?
What was kind of going on with me?
Yeah.
I think that for people, so part of what came out of all of this is I was diagnosed with ADHD, and I was diagnosed with an anxiety disorder, generalized anxiety disorder. And what's amazing is really for someone who has ADHD, it is often anxiety goes along with it. And we don't necessarily look at a holistic approach of how they're seen as sort of all these different diagnoses, maybe. Let me just do a clarification here. I'm not an expert. I'm not a mental health expert. Everybody who's listening, hear me loud and clear. The only expertise I have is I've walked that journey as someone who struggles with it. So, lives with it. It's not necessarily a struggle anymore, but we'll get there. I had just given of my soul to the point that I had nothing else to give. And so then what happens is the care that I needed to give to myself, it was almost like it just sort of began to eat at me, and I was not able to care for myself. There's nothing major in my life, no huge traumatic. I mean, I'm the child of a clergy person. There's a lot of trauma there. I mean, being part of a church, growing up in the church, being, you live in a glass house in so many ways, especially the family or the household of someone who works in the church. And so, and the church has done a lot of damage to people who are grieving or struggling. A lot of beautiful work is being done too, and I think there's an awareness now, and I think that's my purpose now, is to kind of be very open about that. So I've just said given. I let people walk over me. I never said no to things. I always said, that's kind of where it happened. And then Hurricane Harvey really was the other piece is I had been through a really bad experience with the previous congregation where I had served. And I had been in this spot for 17 years at this one church, and it had gone through some really hard transition, and I didn't realize that I was a victim of some really hard stuff. And I think Hurricane Harvey was just the straw that broke, as they say, and that's what happened. And so there I was in the hospital. Really not, I was certain that I had something wrong. I mean, I am certain, and this is where I can be extremely vulnerable in this sense, but I mean, I would go to the bathroom and it didn't look like it was supposed to look, okay? And it looked like what the chart on WebMD said it would look like if you had colon cancer. So something as basic as your functions change. And so I was just saying to Kelsey beforehand, I never realized the intimacy or the dance that plays between what happens with your mental health and your physical health. I didn't know the connection of head and stomach. I didn't know. I do now.
Yeah.
And so that's what was going on.
Yeah.
I had just spent a whole lot of life given and not replenishing.
Yeah.
So can I share the fun part?
Please.
The special part?
Yes.
So there was a redeeming moment in the hospital
Yeah.
that changed my path 100%. And I had been in the hospital all night. I was at my wit's end. They were sending us home, and I fought. I didn't want to go. I didn't want to go home. Not because I don't love my home or my family. I was frightened. And this man comes in, kind of rough looking, sort of an aide or really there just to kind of get us moving and help us do whatever, whatever. And he came over to me and he basically said, I know you. And I thought, I didn't know him. He goes, I recognize you. And I thought, okay, something's really wrong with me, And he goes, you're in a ditch, and I'm going to help you out of the ditch. And he goes, he says, I knew somebody once who fought the same war that you're fighting. And he said, and that was me. And he said, I just don't want to send you home. And I said, well, they want to send me home. And he said, well, I'm going to go talk to the doctor myself and ask him if we can give you something, just something. And he goes, I have an idea what I think they ought to give you. And it was Klonopin. I'm happy to share that. And it was just to settle me down, to stop the spiraling, just to stop it. You keep in mind, I hadn't eaten, I hadn't slept. I can't even believe I still had tears. My wife, God love her, I couldn't believe she was still standing. I had a daughter at home who was worried to death about her daddy, and I couldn't do anything. And so he got a prescription for Klonopin for me. And it was just for a few days until I was able to connect with hopefully somebody. And I took one, and by the time we got to the car out in the parking lot, I turned to Kristen, my wife, and I said, I'm really hungry. I was really hungry. I hadn't been hungry. I mean, there's a recipe in this book of my favorite cookie. My wife had made those to try to get me to eat. I couldn't eat them. And she goes, she was so excited. What do you want to eat? And I have really a high class palate. I wanted a bacon, egg, and cheese biscuit from McDonald's. That is what I wanted. I ended up eating 3 of them. I drank 2 things of OJ, and I had some hash browns. And then I slept for 2 days. And I wasn't better when I woke up. I mean, I was still very sick in that process, but I had a reserve, or at least the seed of a reserve, that I knew that that's what I needed to do. So that opened the door for me, and then I ended up going to one more emergency clinic because they actually ironic as they dealt with a lot of homeless folks at this one sort of off satellite site. I ended up going there, and this amazing Indian woman came in, and she said, I want you to take any medicine you're on, whatever. This is what's going on with you. I know it, I see it, I feel it, and I'm going to help you find a psychiatrist and a therapist. And so we began that work. And so I met the Good Samaritan. And when I saw the face of God in that man. And the last thing he did was tore that piece of paper that they handed me, and wrote his name on it and his phone number and said, call me if you need anything. And he said, don't tell anybody I'm doing this because I'm not supposed to do this. I care about you. I never called him. I don't have the piece of paper. I don't remember his name, but I think about him almost every day. So.
It sounds like his witness of you, his really seeing you and compassionate presence was the healing balm
It was.
that you can't bill for in the medical system.
No.
And it was and is the face of God.
Oh, 100%.
And you talk a couple times about home and what home does and doesn't mean, and also being at home in each other's presence. Which leads me kind of to the other side of the coin of why is all of this so isolating? Why is mental health and talking about this, why is there so much stigma, Roger? And why do we hide and hide each other?
I don't know that there's an easy answer, of course, but I think the acknowledgement that is the case.
Yeah.
And it is in these places where we want to find safety and love that we often don't. So in the ER, I didn't get that until I met him. The church, as I mentioned, I love the church. I've given my entire life to the church. So this is just a statement, is that even after I was diagnosed with an anxiety disorder, a parishioner went to my boss and said, I don't think Roger needs to work with the children and youth anymore because he has a mental illness. And I thought, well, who in the world doesn't? I mean, in a way, we're all struggling. And I think it is, we're a proud people.
Yeah.
And we in shame and guilt, I call them, in the book, I talk about them like they're fertilizer. Till that stuff in, and you'll grow. But that's what it is. It's not anything more than that. So the shame and the guilt of not being put together, you know, and I was my own worst enemy. I have a great presence, and I smile, and I'm happy, and have a happy family, but still in the midst of that, I didn't want to let people know how much I was really hurting.
Yeah.
And I think that's the case with so many people. I was sharing with you that men, you notice, here we are. There's not a lot, and that is a population of people who it's just, you know, men, people of color. It is such a stigma to admit that you are feeling weak, or you're lonely or afraid. And so, and so I get emails and I get texts and I'll get messages on Facebook all the time from men who say, I've never talked to anybody about this. And this is how I'm feeling. And, you know, all I can do, and what I do is listen and remind them that I'm not going to tell them what's going on with them, but I can sort of mirror their feelings a little bit and share, and then maybe offer some thoughts of, you know, what are some strategies that have worked for me. And that's really what this is. This whole book is just sort of being honest about moments where I didn't realize that I think in the introduction I say, you know, the seeds of anxiety were being planted in this garden way early. And I didn't know how they would bloom later in my life. And so that's what was, and I just, again, I think it's hard to get information. I think it is, I'm not going to poo-poo social media and all of that stuff because it's an important thing and it's part of our lives, but I think we live in a touched up world.
Yep.
You know,
Yep.
we hide the wrinkles, we hide the dark, we hide the fear. We put out a beautiful little picture that looks great, and we're not honest. And I think that the more we can be honest in places like this, churches are grieving themselves right now. I mean, I think we talk about people having anxiety. I mean, there are institutions we are part of that are living with extreme anxiety, and they're just looking for that little pill to help them feel better so they can get to work. And how do we find that? You know, what is that? And so I don't have an answer. I just know that it is not a world that is particularly kind to those of us who struggle.
Yeah.
So.
And if, you know, a follow-up question to that is what is our Christian responsibility to each other?
One of my favorite, I love thinking about Jesus in ways that aren't the beautiful stained glass versions of Jesus. So in one of my favorite stories I shared is that, you know, I love Jesus, and you know, he's got the Justin Bieber hair and the great photo, I mean, and the blonde and the whatever. That's all ridiculous, but I love seeing that. But what I say is, I really love the pissed off Jesus when Jesus threw the table and spit was flying and veins were bulging, and he was angry because that was real, and he was angry and upset. And I think that as Christians, it's important that we see those, that, you know, when Jesus sweated blood, I mean, my anxiety was so bad one night that I burst blood vessels in my eyes.
Oh, wow.
And so when I woke up the next morning, the whites of my eyes were the color of red. And it was just the anxiety and the exhaustion and all of that had played a point. So I identified at some level. I'm not Jesus, I'm not saying that, but the humanity of Jesus in those moments where, you know, he sweated blood, or he wept, or those to me make Jesus real. And so I think as Christians we have a responsibility to make space I don't know that we know how to fix anything, but it's not about fixing. It's about navigating and journeying together and being in community, no matter what you bring to the table. I love thinking about, I look at the floor here in the church, beautiful by the way, but all the feet that have walked here, and all the grief, the joy, the hands reaching out, all the things. And that's what the church, and that's what we should be, as a place to receive that.
Yeah.
And not send people away.
Right. Yeah, so my mind is going a million
Mine
directions.
too, and
so,
this is where
so
my ADHD begins to set in, so grab me.
And my like, our creative brains, I'm like, we need to just paint, Roger, let's just paint. Yeah. So couple of threads of connection here. Yeah. One is the perennial question, am I my brother's keeper?
Right.
Cain and Abel, like, what is our responsibility to care for each other? That is the question of all time. The response of the friend or the stranger, like the Samaritan moment, that the compassionate presence is enough.
Yeah.
The compassionate presence is enough. And Dean Sarah was saying, ministry is chaplaincy. Yeah. It is being with, it is seeing one another, it's believing each other. And perhaps the work of the church collectively is that we need to stop transmitting pain and start transforming it.
Yeah.
Can we be a place where folks can come in with their real, authentic lives and selves to be seen, believed, loved, experience compassionate God in each other, so that pain, anxiety, it all starts to transform.
That is the greatest challenge, and it's the greatest, and it is the greatest gift that we can offer. So COVID for us, I keep going to COVID because it was such a central spot for the church and for me, and how we respond to people. So many things ended that needed to end, that were going to linger for a long time because we stopped gathering together. Some of these things just couldn't happen anymore. What we figured out is that the church still could happen, but our beautiful buildings were shut down for a while, and we can gather outside, or we can gather Zoom. I mean, there are ways that we gather. And in a way, I won't say for church people who were trying to get the video cameras to work and all that craziness, you turn on a dime, you are instantly trying to put everything online and do all the things with unbudgeted money, et cetera, et cetera. But in a way, it simplified things, in a way, because really what we just needed to do is be together. That ended up being the longing that everybody had. It wasn't what curriculum are you using. It wasn't all the different committee meetings. It wasn't any of that. It's are you eating? Are you doing okay? Have you heard from so and so? It was some of these basic touch points that people are desperate for. Also, at the same time, where marriages fell apart during COVID, and some were deepened in beautiful ways because of the intimacy. So it's just a complex time in our lives, and I think the church is trying to figure out, and Christians especially, too, are trying to figure out what is our role in that, and how do we do it. I will say, let me just say, I'm really happy now, but I'm sharing some really tough stuff with you. But on part of my journey, one of the things somebody said to me, I know this great Christian therapist. And I almost broke out in hives. I'm in therapy because of Christians, and I didn't. God forbid that I go. I mean, there's some great Christian therapists, don't get me wrong, but that is not what I needed. And what I needed was somebody safe outside of what my norm was. It's somebody who wasn't, I joke about the verse, even the birds do not worry, whatever. I worried. I worried. So don't quote a Bible verse at me.
Yeah.
That comes, and that's an integral part of my healing. But in the moment, that's not what I needed. And so my Buddhist therapist and Buddhist psychiatrist taught me more about the love of Jesus than I had learned in a long time. And that was very powerful to me.
Oh, yes.
And so I think that's another part for us to do, is to be able to sort of, I love when interfaith things happen and we can be together. And because guess what? I just shared with you that the Art of Calm is has been translated into Arabic, which is a stunning thing. And our faith communities really are very different, but not really in so many ways. They're just human beings trying to navigate a really tough time.
Yeah.
And so I think the more we can do together, the more we listen to each other, the more we can just be in space together. And I think isolation is something that is, loneliness is the number one leading killer of people. Loneliness. And, I've often heard, and I looked it up, and it is true that in Britain they actually have a minister of loneliness that has been put on staff for the government because of that loneliness is such a crisis.
Yeah.
So I think community is so important in all of this.
Yes.
See I'm going all over the.
But we're with you. We're with you. And community, and I wonder too about when we are gathered together, are we actually present to one another?
Right.
Because it's the worst thing in the world when I've been in dips of my own depression, to show up in a social space and feel, in a room of 100 people, and you leave there and you're just like, that sucked. That actually just made it worse, right? So, being mindful that when we are gathered together, how present are we to each other? The quality of engagement, I think, with each other is so important.
I think we all want to fix. I go to fix. That's such a Southern word. I'm a fixer. And you know what? The worst thing I do is try to fix. Sometimes just being in the depression, in the grief, is what needs to happen. Boxing that stuff up isn't healthy. And so to be a community where people can authentically hurt and bring what they can is one of the greatest gifts.
You talk about that being in it, and very wise recommendation here is you say, do not go at it alone. Make sure someone is holding the ladder.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit more about what it means to be in it? The tools, toolkit you talk about that I love.
That was fun, yeah.
So how do we be in it, Roger, authentically, but also safely?
I think what we all, whether we experience anxiety or not, need to turn up our sensitivity meter a little bit to be able to know and acknowledge that people are hurting. And not to be afraid. I would have loved for somebody like you to come up to me and go, your eyes look really tired. Nobody did that. So I suffered in silence for a long time, where all that would have helped, just the acknowledgement to say, are you okay? And not just to say, are you okay, with a yes or no answer. That we do that. Can I come sit with you? Can we go get a cup of coffee? Do you mind if I just come sit with you? We don't have to talk. What an amazing gift that is.
Yeah.
We're not comfortable doing that. And if we could become comfortable doing that, That's a powerful thing. And so we have to be able to, the story comes from I climbed a tree. I had this, I was feeling much better, and I climbed this tree in my backyard. And I was so excited. But I did it with nobody knowing. I put a ladder up against the tree, and my wife was none too happy that I had climbed up in this tree in the backyard. I was, and she said something like, somebody needs to hold your ladder. I was like, whoa. So then I started thinking about who is the team around me? Who is my pit crew? Who's my village? Who are those people? They love you, Roger, because you're Roger. They're going to love you if you say, hey, I'm having a hard time. And if they let you go, okay. Then that wasn't, but that doesn't happen. And I do remember just reaching out to a couple of people at some point going, I'm not okay. Can you call me sometime? And that was amazing. And so I think we have to be willing to give that, and also to be willing to receive it.
Yes.
If somebody offers to just come sit with you,
yes.
Silence is hard. It's also very healing if you can just be in a space. And don't try to fix it.
Yeah.
It's okay.
It's okay, yeah. I love that image of the pit crew. Who can hold this?
Yeah, who puts your tires on? Who makes sure they're on there? Who puts theirs, fills your tank?
Who's willing to hold my ladder? Whose ladder can I hold?
Exactly.
And this will be my last question, because I know we need to do audience questions, but you have this awesome story at the end of the book around trying to find your freaking hammer that you can't find, and I think you lose your screwdriver, actually physically, trying to find tools for your toolbox, and sort of leads to this bigger metaphor of what's in the toolbox for this, right? And you name a few. You say time, patience, rest, nourishment, therapy, grace, and humor. I would add potentially, if it's fitting, medication too, right? Good medication. For me, it took me 4 times of trying to find the right meds to where now I'm like, all right, I'm good. And that's part of my toolkit.
Yeah.
So can you talk a little bit just to kind of,
I'll share a little bit.
Set it up,
Because it is fun. I mean, so much of what we talk about it has been heavy. And there were some really very, very light moments in all of this. And I'm going to share 2 things. Not about that, but there is one I will share that's so funny to me. I can laugh at it now, and I think a lot of people appreciate it. I needed to get out of the bed. I couldn't get out of the bed in the morning. I needed something to make me feel, I don't know. I love to laugh, and I was like, I need to figure out how do I get up? So I was looking for something on YouTube one day. And I didn't, I was just scrolling. And I was like, oh, maybe I can do, like old people chair yoga or old people chair exercise. Something that I can do just to move myself. Yeah. I mean, that was just in my mind. I mean, I'm an old person now, too. I'm just saying, there are 80-year-old people who are much more active than I am. So this was not I just was looking for, chair yoga or something to get me moving. I landed on yoga for pregnant women. And it was the best thing that I ever did. I did yoga for pregnant women. And literally what it was basically be in touch with your body, stretch, breathe. That was really it. Stretch and breathe. And I did it. And so then I got tickled one day, and that was the first time I had laughed. But I'm sitting here going, you are this big guy, and you're sitting in here in this bed, and you're doing yoga for pregnant women. And I loved it, and then I shared about that, and and then with the tool thing is I, for the life of me, can never find the hammer. I need a hammer. Because why? Because I don't put it back where it goes. And it will go in this drawer, or it'll go in this drawer. Some people have one junk drawer. If Roger was in charge of my house, we'd have 6, and I would, they just go in the junk drawer. I looked in my toolbox, there's nothing in it. Screwdrivers were missing. Nothing was there. And I was like, okay. So then I go sit outside, and I find the hammer on the ground where I left it with some previous job I was doing. And so then that's when I began to think about, what are the tools in our toolbox? and some of that is, it could be practical things, make sure you're drinking enough water. Make sure you're one of the greatest things I still do it, is I use Calm app on my phone. And it is a great app for me. And it just helps me, there's another thing I do, Yoga Nidra. It's just a very simple, it's just, again, it's a meditation. So I do a lot of that because my brain still runs. And yes, I honor the medication thing because for me, medication is very much a part of what I need. I take, I take Lexapro and I take Adderall. Those are two things that I use, and I'm happy. I'm not ashamed of doing that, and that the two things work very, very good for my system. I did try several things, and it was not good.
Yep.
So you have to. So that's the hard part. You want something to help quickly, and that's not always the case. And some people can't do medication, so that's not part of their toolbox. But then I thought of other things, even just journaling, writing down my thoughts, right? Keeping the names of people who I know I can reach out to. Yeah. So there's all kinds of, I think that's a really fun project, is to think about what would be in your toolbox. What do you carry with you out? Something to help somebody else.
That's right.
Yeah,
and I love too that, as Episcopalians, you draw on our tradition and on our faith too. You talk about Compline and baptismal covenant too, as lament, like as sort of these, the intersection of where faith and ritual sort of comes in to also be a tool in the toolbox.
Definitely.
Yeah.
I mentioned Compline. Compline was very central to me and still is. I did Compline in the middle of the night when the world was ending during Hurricane Harvey. I read Compline all night long. And tornadoes were hitting 2 miles from our house. And, and I was hiding in the dog food closet, and my wife and daughter, they were hiding in the bathroom. And I was sitting on the thing of dog food with our dog. It was just one of these crazy moments, but that's where I turned.
Yeah.
I turned to the words of our faith and the central, beautiful nighttime prayers. Baptism, the baptismal covenant, I love. I talk about marked, the whole idea of being that we're marked as Christ's own. Just real quick, the tattoo I have is a bluebird, and it says abide, and there's a little bird's nest. And this is here because my wife said to me, I want you to do something that shows you that Easter is going to come, that resurrection happens every day. And I want you to see, I've always had a love-hate relationship with my body, as most of us probably have some issue with. And she said, I want you to be able to see this every day and know that you're going to be okay, and that spring is always going to come. And so I do. I see this every day. And I think that's how I would love to sort of end this part, is just to say that the book is called Art of Calm. I don't know the Art of Calm. It's not what I wanted them to call it, actually. They changed my title, but in a way I do love it, because, when you're an artist, you try, you keep going, and you practice, and you learn, and so that's what that is. So, yeah.
It's a real gift, this book. So if you haven't lived with it, do it, buy it, practice. And I was really, just to close out, this quote. Yeah. You talk about healing, and you use kintsugi also, which is a Japanese practice of bringing the pieces together and letting go of shame of imperfection and letting it become a new thing. And you also say this, you say, maybe healing is not a single occurrence, but a moment in time that sends ripples into the world that washes over each of us.
I wrote that.
You wrote that. So thank you, Roger.
Thank you. No,
Such a
thank
gift.
you. Thank you.
So I guess,
Yeah, questions. If anybody
Yes,
here has
please.
a question for me, I'd love.
I'm coming to you.
Thank you.
There you go.
Really sweet. And well done. Thank you.
Roger, I was listening to 6 of the former Surgeon Generals convening at Dartmouth College. And one of the things they're most concerned about is mental health with youth.
Yeah.
And my question is, how can churches create brave spaces for our youth?
Thank you for that question. Is spot on for what I do in my day-to-day life. I recently we just went through a strategic plan at the church where I serve, and I am now, I was doing all kinds of things. Now I'm focused on children and youth specifically. Somebody asked me, oh, that's a demotion. And my reaction to them was, no, it's actually the most important job I'll probably ever have. And I think that a way that a church can create brave spaces or communities can keep is they love games. They love silly games and things like that. Teenagers do. But they're not going to break easily. They can talk about hard things. And I think that if we can provide a space where they are not judged and that they are heard, and that I talk about mental health with my 3, 4, and 5-year-olds. Maybe not in description of anxiety in that way, but we talk about sometimes we have a hard time going to sleep at night. And we practice breathing. And I teach them a breath prayer, So we don't have to be afraid to talk about hard things. And so I think, I'm working right now, we're doing a class on sex. We actually have a sex class that we're using a group called OWL, and it's Our Whole Lives. And it's an incredible program where it's no holds barred, and we talk about all of it. And by talking about it and not being afraid of it or making fun of it or being super silly's part of it, it's great. The human body's funny and sex is fun, all that, but we're providing a space where they're not going to be out one day going, not knowing what to do with themselves and how they're feeling. And so I just think it's hard. It's a shift. Churches are scared to talk about these things and provide space for these kinds of things, but I think that's a bold move that we can make as Christians. I don't know if that answers your question at all, or at least touches on it.
Our walk back from our supper. And I don't know how old you were when you started grappling with some of these issues, but I have a son who is 18 grappling with the very same. Mm-hmm. What would you tell your 18-year-old self, Roger, or even my 18-year-old son who's severely ADHD and has anxiety issues? What would you tell him about how to think about his life? And then I can go tell him.
No, again, it comes to a similar place of the question about youth. How do we make a safe space? I think that it's important to listen, and it's important to use I statements versus you are doing this and you are doing that. I think it's very important to let them be in that space. I also think it's important, again, to name it to them. This is what you can say, this is what I'm seeing. That's the kind of stuff. It's recognizing what they're feeling. Now, you may not be able to, being his mama, you may not be the person to do that. But it may be, but what would I tell? I would sit with him and listen, and I would be straightforward and say, how are you feeling? Or I would identify in myself and be able to say, hey, I would get to know him. And then I would also be able to say, I see some things. I recognize this in you. And I know he's going to push back. That's part of also being 18 years old. I mean, that's going to happen as well. And we have a 21-year-old who navigated a really, really tough time. And so her brain is still forming, and his brain is too. And just just hug him and hold him, and that's what I would say. Forgetting is, huh? Sure. Well, I mean, I think there are other ways than, talking about things is hard sometimes too. And that's why I turn to art often, or photography, or those are the things that I have found other ways that inspire conversation, where trying to just sit and say, Mom, I'm feeling like this, that's not going to come out necessarily, but think of ways, what are some other, yeah. So I think art is a very important thing. I think writing is a very important thing. I think providing some different tools. I also wrote this for knowing that age group also might engage with it. It's not heady scientific writing. It's heart writing. And it's just real. I mean, I tell stories of, all kinds of things. There's some really funny things in there. I hated PE, and I used the bathroom in my pants. I go back to a bathroom. I have a lot of bathroom function issues in this book, but I was running a race, and it was a PE. It was field day, which is horrible, and it was hot, and I was made to run a race, and it just didn't turn out well. But there are funny moments like that where people received me no matter what. Miss Bailey, my very large, very short, very large teacher, held me in her arms. I had dirty pants in the 4th grade. And when I think of God, I think of Miss Bailey. So I think there are ways to sort of engage in conversations that don't name, I think you're anxious. That doesn't help. But there are ways to sort of discover, I don't know, I'm not helping you. But everybody's so individual, and you have to just know. I'm rambling, I'm sorry.
Couple of questions.
Okay.
I'll stack them up. The simplest one first. What was your title?
What was my?
Your title.
Oh.
That they made you change.
Thank you for asking. So I discovered photography over COVID, and I started walking. And I started walking about 6 miles a day. And during COVID, I lost 50 pounds just walking every day and noticing beautiful things. And I one day looked up the word, what I wanted to do is, so my plan was to call the book Drawing with Light, which is what the word photography means. And I thought that was beautiful. It was too beautiful, and people aren't going to Google, they might Google calm or anxiety. So they needed a more marketable title. But what I wanted to do is every chapter was going to have a photography themed, like focus, filter, noise, all these different terms, which would have worked beautifully. This is better. But yeah, that was what the title was going to be.
Photography. The second question is, it sounds like your history was a little traumatic, and I'm wondering, it built up over time, and are you able to identify a trigger that sent you to the point of needing help so desperately that you went to the hospital?
Yeah.
Yeah. I think I'd love to hear you talk
well,
about that.
A couple of things happened that were physical reactions that I had, that I began to know that this wasn't right. One of them, I normally could sleep, and I couldn't sleep. I would lay down, and then I would get so frightened, not of like the boogie monster, but it was just this overwhelming just angst about the world, and I'm not the only one. I mean, when wherever you are politically, you've got COVID, you've got, I had Hurricane Harvey. There's always things in the world that are going on that heighten that for people. And so I was in the midst of all of this was also happening during George Floyd. And George Floyd is from Houston. And all of that was happening. And I just couldn't. And so I couldn't find God in that. I would call out and I wouldn't hear anything. I didn't get any, So that's just kind of how these physical things. My arms were burning. I could feel my arms burning. And it was just, and it was all symptoms of anxiety. My heart was healthy. Everything's healthy. But my mind was really tired. And what I learned is, and I offer this to people, is that somebody said, a panic attack, I used to think that it was going to kill me. I mean, it was really frightening. A panic attack isn't going to hurt you. Sometimes that same person she read at the beginning said to me, just sit there, let it wash over you, because it's going to go away in a few minutes. You're going to be tired, you may be teary, you may be just worn out, but sometimes just letting it go and knowing that it doesn't have control of you, although it feels like it in the moment. I don't know if that helped. If that answered your...
I have kind of situational anxiety at times, not chronic, and I know my triggers. Like,
your
certain
triggers.
things
Yeah.
make me just, it's off and on, and so I just wondered if you had like a thing.
There's certain things. I mean, I'm actually really introverted, and I've had to learn how to be an extroverted introvert. You have to do that in church work.
Yeah.
But I know what I have to do.
Right.
I know what I have to do. So on a Sunday, for example, I go home after church and I take a nap. My wife and I don't talk to each other probably until 5 o'clock. When I'm rested, she's had quiet time, and then we can then engage. But I've been with people all morning, and then that's all I can do. So that's my triggers. I will say that if I don't take care of myself in those ways, that's where it begins.
I have another question. If
You're fine.
Does anybody else want this? And this is hard. I'm sorry to go here, but I'm going to. You said how important, and so did you. You offered this up and you took it. How important community is and being met where you are and having all those touch points that are meaningful when you're down in the dirt. And I'm thinking about the place that we all come every Sunday. And you ask what Christianity and what do we bring to this? How can we help as an organization? And I think about it. I come to church on Sunday and I bring myself into this physical space, not just this one, but every church I've ever gone to. And I have to admit that I don't think there's a place I go in a week that I feel more like I have to be perfect. It's quiet. Everybody sort of wears the best thing they have in their closet.
Yeah.
It's formal. We all sit still and we're quiet. We don't scream. We had I don't know if you guys will remember, I think we were sitting close to one another one Sunday a month or two ago. There was someone in the congregation that was demonstrating some mental health issues, and all eyes were on that person. So that tells you what happens when somebody's in that situation and not acting normal. I'm just wondering if the way we worship is offering comfort and I mean, it's a weird thing to even think about, because on the flip side, it's the most beautiful internal time for me.
Yeah.
But you were asking what, and I just wonder if there's a seed of something here that can open up opportunity for us to have other ways to worship. I mean, I feel this way, but don't even get me started on this, but education, I think, is broken, needs to be reworked.
Oh.
Conventional medicine, I don't even use it. There's a lot of models that are broken that need
Yeah.
to adjust.
Yeah.
But I just wonder if there is an opportunity for something.
Well, there certainly is an opportunity. And I think you begin by doing what you just did, is you name it. And I think you've got to name it and name it and name it and be that person. It may be a thorn in your side at some level, but I get it and I understand that. You're right. Church is not conducive for so many who come in and cannot be authentic in the way that they need to be. It can be isolating. And then also during COVID, again, that also even set it up even more because you couldn't sit next to people. You couldn't, there's some physical separation and then there's just separation of history and ego. It's nice to live in Biltmore and it's nice to come to the fancy, pretty church, but it's hard to be, it's not messy. And I think there are places, and I think that's, for me, I've seen really beautiful things of small groups. For where I have seen this work happen is in small groups. And that's where I've seen some really amazing things happen, whether it's, 4 people sitting out on the benches having coffee together and having some of that. That's where some of this work can happen too. But I think involving mental health and prayers, naming it, I think naming some of these things and sort of we don't pray for mental health in our prayers. How beautiful would that be if we did pray for some of that every now and then? So I can't answer your question. I don't know. It is, but it's a great question, and it's something I struggle with every day too in the work that I do. I'm full-time at a church, so I see it all the time. They get tired of me talking about it. We sit on the end of the pews. This is a small group tonight. I'm not naming that, but on a Sunday, I see this every Sunday. Sitting on the edge of the pew. Pew's empty. Somebody comes in. Nobody scoots over to let them in. It's just it's a quiet but very loud sound. So I think we have a lot of work to do. We can go on a while, I know.
I'm just going to add my amen to all of this,
I'm with you.
especially coming out of no, especially
Okay.
Coming out of a history of campus ministry. We need to be
Amen.
real. We need to be real.
Yeah.
We need to be
That's
real and
it.
truthful. So, yeah.
The structure is beautiful, and the
It
liturgy.
is. No.
Well, I didn't hear that at all.
Yeah.
What I heard is that you do honor that, and it's important. But how do we? If we can't be our authentic selves in worship,
That's right.
Right.
then what does that mean?
Well, and that's the thing. I can't tell you how many times in doing prepping a family for a funeral or something, that families at funerals of their own loved one will apologize for crying. Good God Almighty, if you cannot cry in church, especially at the death of your loved one, what are we telling people?
Right.
What are we telling people?
That's right.
Yeah, she had it.
Deb had a question.
During my decision making, very young, I decided that I wanted to go into ministry. And I went to seminary. I'd grown up Southern Baptist, so I went to Southern Baptist Seminary. And I graduated, but I didn't really want to go to a Southern Baptist church and work as a youth director. Like I saw when I was a teenager, that she was great. She was a good friend. But I don't want to do that. So I went to search for it. And then I went into mental health. And in that position, I was in a lot of emergency room situations. to get someone out of their home to the professionals who could maintain.
Mm-hmm.
And then I went to a program called Clinical Pastoral Education.
Mm-hmm.
I've done 3 years. One of those years, I started in at Christmas time. One day something just happened to me when I was at work. And I went to the director and I said, I can't do this anymore. And of course, he sent me to one of the resident doctors and found out that I needed major depression.
Mm.
I was at the doctor every day. I went to Ohio to live with my sister. And during that time, a priest encouraged me to live university. So I did. I was assigned to a Jewish hospital in Cincinnati. Most beautiful place I had ever worked. The people, the tradition, my classes, and the friends that I made. One night I was on call, and I went in to see the family. The mother was sitting at the end of the bed. Her son was laying there because he had overdosed and died. I went in and sat down beside her. And I didn't say anything at first. And she said, well, if you're the chaplain, I don't want to talk to you because I don't want to talk to God right now. And I sat there for a few minutes and just held presence with her. And she said, I just wish you would leave. So I got up and walked out of the room. And I thought I would just stay around a little bit to see what else is going to happen. And I went over and sat in front of a nurse who was doing her paperwork. And she started talking to me. And she said, you know, I've had the most horrible experience tonight because one of the patients was angry, mad, cursing, wasn't cooperating, and I got blood. And I knew at that point, I wasn't there for the family. I was there with the nurse. And we had a conversation. And it was beautiful.
Those moments, you hit it right exactly. Those moments happen when we least expect it. Mm-hmm. And then in the moment, and then in the places where we least, you went in going to do this over here. Mm. And I think God had other plans. Mm-hmm. And I think we've just got to be, and you did it. Mm-hmm. And I think that's what we've got to be open to. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Absolutely. And that idea of being, and Martin Luther always talked about that we're all, as Christians, little priests, mm-hmm. right? Of course, made the church really mad. But, essentially, as followers of Christ, we all are little priests. Yeah. And so it behooves us who carry the love of Christ to administer that love to that person that's in front of us who's needing, and often the person who's in the mirror.
Oh, totally.
Yeah. And that's the hardest person to be, to be Christ-like to for so much of our lives.
We had one right here. She had it. Yeah.
I was thinking about the appropriateness of something like this for churches. I know that the School of Social Work at Chapel Hill is trying to spread across all the 100 counties in North Carolina the idea of mental health first aid for both youth and for adults. And I was wondering how you felt, if you feel that's something that churches should get involved in.
Oh,
Yeah.
yes. 100%. I love the idea of having somebody on staff who, I mean, so often the clergy will get, even me, will get somebody who obviously is seeking professional help and struggling with some of those issues. And I keep a list of people that I will recommend them to go to. I've been part of churches who have a pastoral care, have a parish nurse on the staff. It's brilliant because it focuses on health and nutrition and all kinds of things. Tai Chi, bringing somebody in to do Tai Chi. I mean, why can't the church be a place for that? So no, I fully agree with you that I think that would be money well spent to have that available in a community. Mm-hmm.
Of people trained in the congregation,
Sure.
both youth and adults,
Gotcha.
to attend a 1-day class, 1 or 2 day class.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
People identify when people are having a mental health crisis.
Got it.
And then link them to resources
Got it.
in the community.
So two-part answer. I still think somebody having I love when I see churches that have counseling centers and things like that. I really think that's neat. Except if they use God too much in it, and that's scary. I think that gets scary. I also think that it does not hurt anyone to train. We have safe church training to keep everybody's. Our whole congregation actually does it, which is really a beautiful thing. So we hold tight to that, and that's an important thing. So everybody on vestry, all the staff, but we invite everybody in the congregation to do that. I think to have a mental health training session, and I think a day is not long enough, but wouldn't it be beautiful if during Lent or during a season, that was what you focused on, and you trained the congregation? That in itself will get people, I think, coming back to church. Yep. I think you're inviting people to be honest, share their hurt, and then also know that they have gifts to help others by recognizing when there are moments where people are in crisis. I just got chill bumps. I'm thinking about it now, how I can take that idea back to where I am, and how can we. And the thing is there are groups that we had somebody come in and teach us what to do if somebody brings a gun. Okay, why don't we start in another spot too with mental health and do the same thing? So, thank you for that. I love it. I love that. Keep in mind, I'm in Texas. I know Episcopal Health Foundation, but we can't even read books in Texas, but I know. No, I agree with you. Episcopal Health Foundation. There are some organizations, actually every community, or at least the big cities have NAMI. They're chapters of that, and so they will come lead workshops, happily lead workshops in your communities, at your churches. So,
Other questions? Anything?
we were small but mighty.
Oh my gosh.
Some great questions
Oh
and
my
great, and I appreciate this. I appreciate you coming out on a beautiful Friday night.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
I appreciate it. I don't know if it's courage or just at one point, somebody says, I'll end with this, and they'll, people say, I'm so sorry that happened to you. Mm-hmm. And I've come to the point and where I'm able to say it's actually one of the best things that ever happened to me. It's because it broke me wide open. And I was able to get to know myself in a way that I wouldn't have otherwise. And so if I can encourage people to break open, and there's beauty in that. It's hard, but it's beauty. Yep. It wasn't right. Get in the ditch. Yeah. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
That idea of peer support, which is at the forefront of a lot of what's happening. And we've got, folks talk about Asheville all the time, all the problems we have. We also have a lot of really great organizations working with people on the street, and the best ones are being led by peers.
Yes.
And one of the ones that we work with, Sunrise Center here in Asheville, they literally, when they have folks that come in who get trained as peer support, they tell them the rallying cry is, your record is your resume. And
shout out to Warren Wilson for my experience, because that's where I went to school, and actually Warren Wilson was instrumental in my understanding what it meant to go out and do the work. We were required to do it, but it also became a passion. That's where my passion for this came from, is being, not only working in the kitchen, but also working as a big brother, so.
And I respect, deeply need, adhere to the professionals and professionalism, and.
Yes.
What about the in-between spaces?
Yeah.
We are the peers, we are the in-between moments of healing balm to each other. And so I think if you look at the data point, those interactions of the in-between are far more frequent than the professional therapy sessions or whatever else we got going on. So the both and that we need it all. And so how can we, lift up the peer support? How can we help equip the community, equip each other, and really take the responsibility to care for each other? I think to the worship on Sunday, I'm going to keep marinating on that, because there's something there with this too. That it's not just the Sarah Will situation up here, but what does it look like to do this in the pews over and over and over again? So the authenticity, it's really there. It's good.
That's good.
it is, and I'm just so grateful for the depth. And again, truth begets truth. This is why courage is contagious and truth is contagious. And I've been here just over a year. I've preached here, you've preached here, Will's preached here. We've had some fantastic preachers here. And I got to tell you, there's been more truth in this hour and a half together than I've preached since I've been here. And so I'm excited about this. And I've seen a couple of you people out there. I've checked a little bit, and there are some folks out there on YouTube and Facebook. If this is something that's been helpful to you, please feel free to share this with friends and family and whomever. And I'm going to go out on a limb here. If you have a question, put it in the feed.
Oh, yeah.
And we'll get back to you. Okay? But please type that question in the feed. Or you can certainly, if you're local and want to talk, you can call us at All Souls here in Asheville. But reach out whatever way you'd like, and we will reconnect with you. But thank you for being with us tonight. This is holy time and holy ground, and I'm just so appreciative. And also, I know I've figured out when we were sitting here why I love you so much, Rogers, because you are I married your secret twin. That's why.
Oh. We have a connection, huh?
Yes, indeed, indeed. And so I'm just so grateful to have you here. And Kelsey, thank you for being a fantastic facilitator.
Oh my gosh, thank you.
Yeah, what a great,
Thank
great
you.
evening. And yes, thank you. So we are going to shift into signing, and I was hoping that maybe one of y'all might want to offer some prayer on the way out.
Sure, I'm happy to. Gracious God, we give thanks for silence. We give thanks for this space, for this community gathered here in person, for the community gathered online, for the ripples that are spreading. We give thanks for pain and growth and stretching and healing and sharing and listening. And we give thanks for hope and joy. May we be life bearers, life givers in a world that is crying out for it. In Jesus' good and holy name we pray. Amen. You're very welcome. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thanks. That's great. Oh, it means so much. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
We can take you